Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto dies after sealing the Kyuubi, but God decides to save him? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Konohagakure no Sato. 10th of October. The autumn's night was filled with cries of pain and suffering, smell of death strong in the air, and sounds of ruin ruled the night. Tonight was the most devastating day for Konoha, for it had come under the attack of the most powerful and dangerous of tailed beasts, Kyuubi, or nine-tailed fox. Unleashed upon the village from his confinement by a malicious person that sought to bring ruin to this village, Nine Tails had caused unprecedented amount of damage to the village, leveling entire swaths of it by mere roaring. Nearly all of Konoha's shinobi rose up and answered the call of duty, striking at the beast with all their might and power, yet it all seemed to do nothing but irritate the beast even more. And the angrier he grew, more and more of loyal sons and daughters of Konoha fell to him, the tally already reaching past hundreds, and now several thousands of shinobi had served their lives to this beast of calamity. And all this time, the beast was under the control of the man that had unsealed him, the one who attacked Kushina Uzumaki just as she gave birth to her triplets, and was trying to kill Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage and husband to Kushina. The two seemed evenly matched for some time, yet victory ultimately was claimed by Minato, who managed to sever the connection between Kyuubi and this man, who claimed to be Madara Uchiha himself. Once it was done, however, Fox regained his freedom at last, and it was set to not be imprisoned again by anyone, and with greater than before rage and power, it began to destroy Konoha, and in mere minutes it achieved more than he had done under the control of Madara. Shinobi were already losing hope and fighting out simple stubbornness to surrender, when Minato had managed to intervene and teleport the beast away, saving his village and his people. But merely relocating Nine Tails was not enough, because now there was an even more dangerous task ahead of him: resealing that creature. For that very purpose he teleported to the site with his exhausted wife Kushina and their children, Natsu, Narumi and Naruto. He already made his decision to have the Nine Tails split into two parts and sealed into his two eldest, Natsu and Narumi, believing that the two will be able to handle the beast's power. He didn't know if Kushina would be able to handle the resealing, since the childbirth was extremely difficult and had nearly cost her life, especially with Naruto. He needed to act, and act now, as Nine Tails was regaining his bearings. Kushina, I must seal the beast again. Please, lend me your strength, hold him at bay. Minato asked of Kushina, with her crying out of pain, with golden chains shooting out from her back and restraining the beast. That's it, Kushina. Now just hold him. Minato, I can't, Kushina wheezed out before she fell down and lost conciseness, her chains dispelled the very next instant. Kyuubi roared and already began to storm towards Minato and Kushina, intent to kill them with their children. Minato already prepared to teleport his family out of here, when he heard soft feet land near him, forcing him to look to his left, widening his eyes in surprise. There stood a tall, beautiful woman with long mane of dark red hair, dressed in red and black garments, with a long tachi sword strapped to her hip. She gazed with her crimson eyes at the beast, before the shape of her iris changed into that of Sharingan, and then it was activated, immediately stopping the beast in its tracks and literally freezing him in his place. Minato breathed out the name of the woman. Tomo. Minato could hardly believe his eyes, with the woman not even sparing him a glance, far too concentrated on containing the beast. How did you? Does it matter, right now? You wanted to seal that beast back, then get to it, Minato. It takes my all just to maintain my jutsu on him, so hurry it up. Tomo practically snarled at him, as her right eye bled and she felt the pressure from maintaining her ability. Yes, thank you, Tomo. Minato thanked her and heavens for this opportunity, as he quickly went ahead and performed the needed hand signs. Reaper Death Seal. Tomo had nearly turned her head to Minato when she heard him but restrained herself. The very next moment, the air grew cold and heavy, as if death itself had appeared here, and both of them knew that it was true, with Minato witnessing Shinigami firsthand. Mortal, For what purpose did you call upon me in this realm? The Shinigami spoke to Minato in a chilling cold tone and voice. I summoned you to have the 9 tails divided in 2 and his halves sealed into my eldest children, Natsu and Narumi. Minato spoke to it, with Shinigami seemingly unmoved by his plight. Please, I beg of you. The fate of my village and all of my people is at stake. I care not for them, mortal, but I will do what you ask. Shinigami spoken and went to work. With his ethereal blade, Reaper divided the frozen beast, before grasping both of the souls with his hands. The moment it happened, Tomo had released her ability and dropped to the ground, panting and breathing heavily, her nostrils filled with blood that rushed out and whole body going numb from the stress, yet her will maintains her awake, as she watched the 2 halves of Kyuubi being sealed in the children. Shinigami finished his work quickly, and then turned to Minato, prepared to claim his prize. I've done your bidding, now you will pay for summoning me. Shinigami spoke as a matter of a fact and began to reach for Minato. However, the moment when Shinigami was supposed to grab Minato's soul, something completely unexpected happened. Shinigami, the god of death and one to claim all souls, couldn't grasp Minato, who didn't even know what was happening. It was only a second later that Shinigami spoke up, his harsh voice now filled with disdain and rage. How dare you, mortal, to deny me my rightful prize? You think that tricking death personified will not go unpunished? Shinigami roared at Minato, who flinched and took a step back out of fear. You may've substituted your soul with someone else's in the past, but that doesn't mean I will let this slight stand. You wished for your eldest to have the beast's power, and now you will have your youngest pay for the crime against me. The ghostly hand shot towards crying Naruto, grasping him. No. Minato tried to stop the Shinigami, but was unable, as he was frozen in place. Shinigami reached for the child's soul and was prepared to take it for himself right away, but another thought crossed his mind, born out of malice and anger. Instead of claiming the child right away, he shall make this mortal suffer and watch, as his child is taken by death, piece by piece, while he is unable to do anything. Shinigami grasps Naruto's soul and brands it, immediately putting a stop to Naruto's cries, as a small piece of the child's soul is taken by Shinigami as an appetizer. Once he has done so, he turns to struggling Minato and speaks once more. For your gall and disrespect of this ritual, you and your wife shall watch as this child pays for your crime. Day by day, his soul and all of his being shall be consumed by me, and soon, before long, all that there will be left of your youngest is an empty husk, as his soul is sent to Yomi, to be served on the platter before me and my brothers. That is your punishment, mortal. And with that said, Shinigami had dispelled himself out of this world. In that moment, Tomo saw how Minato dashed towards his children, checking first on his eldest, and only then going to his silent youngest, grasping for him and shaking his hand away. Tomo knew not what had transpired between Minato and Shinigami, but she understood that whatever had happened, Naruto was now the one paying the price for dabbling with powers beyond men's control. It was only then that she had allowed herself to be taken by weakness and fell, closing her eyes. Unknown to all of mortals, Biju, and even Shinigami, there was one more spectator of this event, one that paid extreme attention to what had transpired. For millennia, he had watched mortals, witness their cycle of endless destruction, carnage and suffering, and brought about by shinobi and their wars, fueled by greed, ambitions and hatred. He saw how his very own children and their descendants, the Uzumaki, were made part of that cycle and were consumed for trying to break out of it. His people, their homes and land, all was now ruin and dust, and those that remained were little more than shades of the past, fading away as the dawn rises and brings about the death of his civilization. For millennia he watched, and now, witnessing how the last flicker of hope for his people is now destined to be snuffed out, he breaks his watch. He has had it with universe taking away all that he cherished. He was going to retaliate against it, and to do this, he shall do what even beings like him would dare not to. He shall go to Yomi, and seek out the one who commands these Shinigami. 6 days later, Konoha's hospital. Well, it looks like your blood pressure is normal, and all of the other tests show that you're free to go home, Tomo. Tsunade Senju spoke, as she looked at the file, while Tomo had breathed, before starting to dress up in her usual garments. However, I would like to remind you, that because of your prolonged usage of your Sharingan and seeing the condition it has left you in, I had sent the report to Hokage. You know what that means, don't you? You don't have to tell me, Tsunade, I long realized that my days as a shinobi were coming to an end. Tomo said with some resignation in her voice, as she pulled up her jacket. How bad did it progress this time? Not as much as I had feared and more than I actually hoped. Tsunade admitted. You should be fine to utilize chakra and most jutsu, even genjutsu, but any utilization of Sharingan, not to mention Mangekyu, and, the prognosis isn't looking great. You were still good to go 6 days ago, before the attack, but now, let's just say that you are at the limit of your allowed health. Use Sharingan or even activate it, and then it'll probably be it for you. Tsunade told Tomo, who fastened her sword on her hip. Tomo simply nodded to her, grateful that she didn't lie to her and understanding that she was right. She herself had been about it for a long time now, ever since the war had ended and she was left with nothing, but emptiness and void, as well as regrets, sorrow and pain that still lingered in her heart. At least in war she was able to quell her sorrows by drowning them in sounds of battle and death, where she earned her nicknames of Devil of Konoha and Death Queen of Konoha. And those two were just the most famous titles by which enemies of Konoha and what few friends she had knew Tomo Uchiha, one of the most dangerous and deadly shinobi on the face of earth and a recognized strongest Uchiha in village. Widely believed to be an equal in power and skills to Madara Uchiha in his prime, there are very few who would want to make an enemy out of one kunoichi that made Kushina Uzumaki, her former teammate and rival, look weak by comparison. Yet, for all her power, accomplishments on the battlefield and her service record to Konoha, that rivaled that of Minato and Kushina combined, Tomo wasn't as fortunate in life as her former teammate and the man that she once loved, and now was married to that said teammate. She was born to Yumiko Uchiha and Raiko Senju, the only son of second Hokage Tobarama Senju, from whom she inherited her innate abilities and strong chakra. However, unlike Tsunade and her brother Naoki, Tomo was born out of wedlock and therefore wasn't recognized as part of Senju clan, while Uchiha clan wanted nothing to do with a bastard child of second Hokage. Add to that her mother dying a few days later due to childbirth complications and her father being murdered on the mission by the third Raikage, Tomo was left alone in this world just a few days after coming to this world. Both Senju and Uchiha wanted to be rid of the child, whom they viewed with contempt and disdain, but before anyone even dared to take a step towards her, Mito Uzumaki, widow of first Hokage, stepped in and took Tomo as her own. She didn't listen to anyone when they demanded that she leave the girl alone, and when she started hearing threats being made towards her, she silenced everyone that even dared to look funny towards Tomo. First Jinchuriki of Nine Tails was a woman of formidable character, one that not even Hashirama and Tobarama dared to challenge, and other Senju clansmen had to remain silent. Mito raised Tomo as if she were her own daughter, and to this day Tomo remembers Mito only as a loving daughter would remember her caring mother. Aside from teaching Tomo secrets to the arts of shinobi and developing her natural skills in elements and swordsmanship, Mito passed on to Tomo her knowledge of sealing arts, something that was only shared among the Uzumaki. Before her passing, Tomo had managed to master most of what Mito had given to her, making her one of the best masters of sealing arts in existence. A natural genius, raised in ways of Senju, with powers of Uchiha and knowledge of Uzumaki, Tomo was practically destined for greatness, yet all she wished was to stay by her mother's side. Unfortunately for her, that wasn't to come, as when Kushina arrived to the village, the Nine Tails was sealed in her, with Mito now being on the brink of death. The last moments of Mito were spent with her daughter, calming her and telling her how happy she was to have such a wonderful daughter. Mito passed away in Tomo's embrace, and since then, Tomo was left alone again. Uzumaki Princess had made a will in which she named Tomo as her heiress and made sure that everything that Mito owned, including her great library, was left with Tomo. However, The village and third Hokage refused to grant that last request of a woman that had given her entire life to this village, and so they've decided to divide it between Tomo, Kushina and village itself, or more appropriately, greedy counselors and Hokage that wished to get their hands on what Mito owned. To this day Tomo hadn't forgiven them for this slight, while Kushina hadn't forgiven Tomo for what she considered to be theft of what was rightfully hers. It is safe to say that their relations were never amicable past that point. Years followed after Mito's death, and as the new war came, so did Tomo come to shine and realize herself as a great warrior and shinobi. Her exploits rivaled those of Minato, and where he was simply hated, she was feared. Having quickly progressed through the ranks of shinobi, becoming a genin at 10, chunin at 12 and jonin at 15, with her feats growing in merit and greatness. But it wasn't fame or glory that Tomo sought, but affections of Minato Namikaze, a boy and later man that had captured her heart very early on. She had tried to win his affections, but when she saw that he didn't view her as she did him, and that he was in love with Kushina, Tomo decided to not stand in their way, even if it was very painful for her. She was almost starting to come to terms with her decision, when one day, some 3 years ago, Minato actually came to her, looking worse for wear. She knew that Kushina was temperamental and that it could be exhausting handling her, and Tomo honestly didn't even know how Minato handled her when she could barely stand her. That day the two had a really big fight. Tomo didn't know all the details, but it was clear that it was serious enough to make Minato leave Kushina that night and seek her out. Young Uchiha didn't even know how did it come to, but that night she and Minato did something for which he was remorseful on the morrow. While that was the best night Tomo had, her hopes and excitement were crushed when Minato had left her without as much as a good enough apology. She realized that to him, she was just a stress reliever, someone to help vent out frustrations, and it made Tomo feel sick, and she would come to wish that this was the only feeling she would have left after him. As it turned out, Minato left Tomo with something she didn't expect, when a few weeks later she discovered that she was pregnant. Shocked and confused, unable to fully understand what she should do, Tomo went to Minato and told him about her pregnancy. It was clear that he wasn't ready for something like that, and he wasn't going to abandon Kushina, now that he was once again with her. He had asked Tomo to abort the child and swear to him that she wouldn't tell who the father was. Needless to say, when faced with real Minato Namikaze, Tomo stated that she won't kill her child, and that she will keep it, but she did promise not to tell anyone who was the father. She decided against it because it would only paint a giant target on her back, with Kushina wanting to take the shot. When her pregnancy became obvious to everyone and Tomo was forced to step down from her duties, she simply stated that the father of her child died during one of the battles, a common thing to occur in war, and she was left alone. Tomo delivered her child, ironically, the very same day that Kushina had delivered hers, on October 10th, giving birth to a beautiful boy with dark red hair and his mother's eyes. She named her son Masamune, and those were the happiest days in Tomo's life, as she fully dedicated herself to her son and was even planning to leave shinobi ranks to raise him. However, fate is a cruel mistress towards Tomo, and even now she decided to torment her. A few months after giving birth, Tomo had woken up, ready to feed her child, only to find her son in his crib, not breathing and growing colder with every second. Shock and crushing realization set in Tomo quickly enough, yet she refused to admit it, as she tried desperately to have her son wake up, but nothing, not even Tsunade, was able to help her. In the end, Tomo was forced to admit that her son, her precious little child and dearest person in her life, was dead. Nobody knew for certain why and how did it happen, but villagers and shinobi alike quickly began to blame Tomo for this, calling her child killer and such, with people like Kushina only adding fuel to that. For months Tomo was unable to find consolation and peace, grieving her son's death, blaming herself for it, and gradually succumbing to darkness and desire to end her suffering. Had it not been for Tsunade, who stayed in the village to take care of poor woman, and Tomo's best friend Amagi, Tomo would have long ended her life. Instead, she decided to use that sorrow and grief and turn it into a flame that would burn her enemies alive, and with newly gained Mangekyo Sharingan, Tomo became fury personified. If before she was just feared as a dangerous enemy, then now she was feared as a vengeful spirit made flesh. She didn't hesitate, showed no remorse and never held back in her battles, taking hundreds of lives, even killing Third Raikage and forcing Kumogakure to sue for peace. And in nearly all of her battles she made extensive use of her new Sharingan abilities, with first one being called Takamagahara. This ability allowed Tomo to create a wide field in which her enemies would find themselves trapped and unable to do anything, not even take a breath. Everything within that field would be frozen, save for what Tomo wished to remain mobile, with not even Minato not able to escape such a trap. Third Hokage too fell into that trap, before his head lost connection with the rest of his body. As for her second ability, it was something that was even more dangerous than her first ability, and she only used it a couple of times before. However, her usage of Mangekyo didn't come without price, only Tomo decided not to notice it, as she was performing at her best. Only after Tsunade had to perform a forceful examination did it come to light that Tomo's body was starting to suffer from effects of constant usage of Mangekyo. Her Senju blood had prevented her from developing blindness and made her Sharingan as strong as it could be, but sheer amount of times she used it was enough to leave a mark on Tomo. Her chakra pathways and body were suffering from extreme pressure upon them and deteriorated when she used her abilities. If she wasn't careful, Tomo would die from simply using her abilities, and so when the war ended, she ceased usage of her abilities. The only time afterwards she used her Sharingan was when she had trapped Nine Tails in Takamagahara, and that one had landed her in hospital. Now Tomo wasn't even allowed to ever utilize her Sharingan, else she dies with near complete certainty. Finishing dressing up, Tomo fixed up her hair a little bit and walked out from the curtain and stepped closer to Tsunade. So, this is it for me? Tomo asked her, with Tsunade nodding to her. Can't say I'll miss being a shinobi, if I'm being honest. Well, at least I'll have more time to spend for everything else. You could always ask to be put in academy as a teacher. If anyone could teach those brats what it means to be a shinobi. Don't even think about it. Tsunade chuckled lightly when she heard that. I have had my fill of academy the first time I went there. I won't be spending the rest of my life teaching up and coming heroes of Konoha how to tie up their shoes. No, I think I really did have enough of shinobi life. Maybe it's time to see if there really is more to life than just service to the village that will throw you out like garbage first time it gets the opportunity. Since when did you become such a cynic? Tsunade asked her. Since I was born, Tomo answered. Sorry if I don't preach will of fire and speak about sacrificing oneself for village. I like to practice what I preach, and following hollow ideals isn't one of those things. You know, that is one of the reasons why people try to avoid you, Tomo. Tsunade pointed out. You would do well not to voice your ideas without caution, especially now. You have nothing to worry about, Tsunade. It's not like I'm the most socially approachable person, so you can relax. Tomo sighed, as she moved towards door. Leaving for home, I hope. Tomo clearly heard a small request in Tsunade's voice. In a bit. I'll just make a stop before that. Tomo said, opening door and stepping through it. I hope it's not at Naruto's room. Tsunade caught Tomo looking her in the eye, already understanding that she was on point. Tomo, it's not normal for you, or anyone else, to be visiting a baby of your rival, especially when he isn't well. You know, rumors have already spread about it and people are starting to think that you might be connected to Naruto's condition. And since when did I care about people's opinion? Tomo asked Tsunade, as they continued to make their way. For most of my life people have been belittling, accusing and blaming me for something. One more thing won't make much a difference for me. And as for that kid, I don't really see him as Kushina's son. Tomo, he isn't Masamune, and, Tsunade tried to speak up, but the moment she met Tomo's glare, she shut up. Don't, Tsunade. Just don't. Tomo warned her, before resuming walking. It's not about what you thought, and I must have spoken wrong. I don't see Naruto as simply Kushina's son, I just see him as a poor child that has seemingly been abandoned by everyone, including his parents. He is constantly under surveillance and there are nurses and doctors monitoring his condition. Tsunade countered. I come to him twice a day to check up on him. Yeah, monitoring, checking up, surveying, Tomo shook her head. Tell me, how many of you have just come in and just sat there with him, kept him company? Maybe, held his hand to make sure that he knows that he isn't alone. The answer is simple. None. Sorry if I come off as weird, but it just doesn't sit right with me, Tsunade, especially with his parents not even bothering to be with him for more than a few minutes. Do please remember that Minato is a Hokage and that we've just been through the worst devastation of our village since its conception, and that Kushina is a feeding mother of 2. Tsunade reminded to Tomo. 3. Tomo said. Sorry. 3, not 2. Naruto too is her child. Tomo reminded Tsunade. I remember it all, yet Minato finds time for seemingly everything, including his wife and children if Amagi is to be believed, while Kushina doesn't even want to look at Naruto. Tomo, you realize that the kid isn't long for this world, right? Tsunade said in a saddened tone, with Tomo not reacting to it. We've done everything we could. I've tried every single medical jutsu I could remember, and yet nothing, not a single thing helps him. He is just dying, and it is devastating for both parents, and they are dealing with it however they can. By pretending that he is already dead and leaving him here alone to pass away in these cold, uncaring walls, surrounded by people who wouldn't even take time to sit with him. Tomo commented with harsh tone. I know that he is not long for this world, Tsunade, and that whatever it is that kills him is beyond your abilities. I honestly don't know how he is still going, either through fate's perverse mercy, or because of some other reason, but, the least we can do for the kid is to make him feel better, make him feel cared for. Dying alone and without anyone around, that isn't a death I would wish for any child. When did you become such a good Samaritan? Tsunade asked her in a slightly annoyed tone. It's called decency and humanity, Tsunade. Maybe you should try it sometimes. It does wonders for a person and soul. Tomo retorted. Indeed it does. The two heard a soft voice ahead of them, making them stop and look at the person. Before them stood a stunningly beautiful woman with chocolate brown long hair reaching to her hips, with purple eyes, dressed in a dark kimono with crane motif on it, which hugged her very impressive figure snugly, while also wearing a light long open red coat over kimono. She had a soft smile on her face, as she looked at her friend, who nodded to her, before bowing before Tsunade out of respect, with the woman in question simply nodding her. This beauty was Amagi, Tomo's closest friend and head priestess of goddess Inari in the local shrine temple, as well as the only priestess serving there. Little is actually known about Amagi's past, save for the fact that she had served as priestess of Inari for most of her life and came to Konoha when she heard that the shrine there wasn't attended to and was practically forgotten. Amagi managed to somehow not only gain citizenship, but also permission to repair and reopen the temple for the people, with none knowing how she managed that. Tomo too didn't know how did she accomplish it, but what she did know about Amagi was that she is a sincere, peaceful and respectful young woman that makes heads turn of nearly every man that sees her. Among kunoichi and civilians none can compete with Amagi in sheer beauty, for she has a face of a goddess and a figure-fitting one, with Jiraiya having been caught trying to catch a glimpse of her outside of her usual kimono more times than he was in peeping in hot springs. Even Tsunade was slightly jealous of Amagi, who had everything that was needed to conquer anyone she could have set her sights upon. Fortunately for the populace, or unfortunately, depending on the opinion, Amagi had little to no interest in romance, as she was dedicated to her calling and didn't want to abandon it. Not that she wasn't against a little bit of flirting and compliments, she simply once told Tomo that she during her younger days she was quite a kitsune, with a soft chuckle followed afterwards. The way Tomo understood it, Amagi has had her wild days and now decided to put it behind her. Despite the fact that Amagi had literally no interest in most things shinobi and hidden villages, Amagi and Tomo quickly became friends and without her, Tomo most likely wouldn't have recovered after losing her son. The two were a common sight in the village, with Tomo enjoying Amagi's company and their talks about all sorts of things, from arts to religion and mythology, interests to which Tomo possessed thanks to Mito teaching her more than just how to kill, steal and be a shinobi. Uzumaki Princess raised Tomo to be a culturally attuned person, someone who wasn't just a blunt weapon without any grace, but a graceful, educated and spiritually rich person, even if Tomo didn't show it. Amagi was quick to discover Tomo's softer and more humane side, which brought them together, as Amagi was someone people would describe as having a bleeding heart for everyone. While shinobi in their vast majority weren't very religious or spiritually rich and interested in philosophy, religion, mythology and so forth, Amagi wasn't the most popular person among them, often even being called a fool because of her beliefs in things like gods, yokai, spirits, ghosts and so forth. Amagi wasn't really upset because of it and doesn't mind people speaking like that. What she can't abide is when people are trying to force others' beliefs upon others, caring not for the feelings of the enforced ones. And as for the common people, not counting counselors, Amagi is most definitely not just a very popular person, but a highly respected and even revered one, since she was head priestess of Inari, goddess of fertility, agriculture, trade and many other things, which were central in peasants, traders and other common folks' lives. She performed burying ceremonies, weddings and so forth, so people loved her for both her role and for her persona. Overall, the population of Konoha was nice towards Amagi, in worse cases neutral towards her. Even Uchiha clan, surprisingly for all, didn't dare to disrespect her, and since many of the Uchiha clansmen had their own small shops and businesses in their own district, they came to shrine to pray for success and good trade. It was, however, surprising for Tomo to see her friend here, since she expected her to be very busy with burial ceremonies, prayers for the dead and so forth, not to mention rebuilding her shrine, if it was caught in the destruction. Amagi, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Are you alright? Tomo asked her. Were you and your shrine caught in the devastation? I'm quite well, all things considered. Thank you for asking, Tomo. I was fortunate that the shrine was some ways away from Nine Tails' path of destruction, so the shrine suffered only superficial damage. I'll have it repaired in no time, once people are finished with their own works. Amagi answered. And here I thought you've already had gotten yourself a brigade of simpletons repairing that temple of yours. Why the wait when you can just ask for it to be repaired? Surely some rich businessmen will be willing to accommodate their favorite fortune teller. Tsunade snidely stated, with Tomo giving her a cold glare, but Amagi didn't seem to be fazed in any way at the insult. The people have far more important things on their mind right now, and it is not my place or time to distract them with my small-time problems, Lady Tsunade. Amagi retorted. And like I said, the damage is mostly superficial and nothing was damaged seriously, so I count myself very fortunate, unlike so many others that are now without home or worse, without someone dear to them. Then why don't you go and pray for those poor unfortunate souls, like you priestesses seem to always do all the time? Maybe you could also ask your deity to have them restored for life. I'm sure if you ask very nicely, that fox of yours will bring them back. Tsunade stated with blatant sarcasm in her voice. Tsunade, Tomo was about to stop her, but Amagi didn't let Tomo finish. Tomo, it is quite alright. It is true that I pray for those that have died on that night, and even now, in my thoughts, I am praying for them to find their way to better world. And it is unfortunate that they are gone, taken away prematurely and in such a horrid way. Amagi stated to Tsunade. And if I could, I would ask for Goddess Inari to bring them back, but I can't, and I know that Inari doesn't hold that kind of power, and that Izanami governs over the souls of dead in Yomi, where they are headed, but I know that she too wouldn't grant me such a wish. Then what good those gods are if they can't do jack about anything? Tsunade asked of Amagi. Gods do not exist just to grant people their wishes, Lady Tsunade. Gods exist for a reason, that is their existence and purpose, just as we all do. I may be mistaken, but gods exist to govern a plane that is beyond for us now, and to preserve the realm we reside in now. We may not see them or even feel them, but that doesn't mean that they do not exist. Amagi stated with soft tone, yet confident in her voice. And would it be such a shock for the people to discover if they really do exist? We do have talking animals of the size that any normal person would consider abnormal and monstrous. Those are summons and they are different from those yokai and spirits that you always spout about in your delirious. Tsunade was starting to get really riled up, but then she felt Tomo put her hand on Tsunade's shoulder, forcing the blonde to face her glaring relative. Tsunade, thank you for walking me, but I'll be able to find my way out. And you can tell Shizune not to expect me for dinner. I'll be staying with Amagi for a while, helping her clean up her shrine. Tomo made it clear that it wasn't up for discussion. Alright, just make sure that you and your friend do not disturb anyone. Tsunade said, as she headed to perform her main duties, leaving Tomo to sigh and look at her friend. I'm sorry for her behavior. She still can't get over what had happened to Nawaki and there are times when she feels like taking it out on someone. Tomo sighed again. While I do sympathize with her losses, I'm afraid that I don't quite understand her animosity towards me. I do not recall ever angering her, or that something connected to religion had played a part in death of her little brother. Amagi noted. It's not about religion or what you believe in, but more about what it reminds her. Tomo told Amagi, who looked at her with a question in her eyes. Nawaki, much like me, was closer to Mito than to Tsunade, and thanks to that, he gained an appreciation for all things supernatural, like with yokai and gods. Tsunade never liked that seeming obsession of his, and so now every time she hears about it, she gets reminded of Nawaki and. I see. Amagi understood what her friend meant. Let's change the subject, shall we? I see you are finally getting released. I wish I could welcome you for a quiet night together, but I'm afraid that it'll be quite hard for us to relax at the temple, at least for the time being. Why? Did something happen during the attack? Tomo asked of Amagi. No, more like an aftermath of the attack. While many people have died, many more were left homeless and without much possessions on them. While the repair works have already started, it's the Shinobi district, clan estates and strategically valuable areas that get priorities to being repaired. Amagi stated to Tomo. And, as I'm sure you've seen yourself, over half of civilian portion of the village was destroyed, and people that lived there now have nowhere to go. And so, given the fact that temple and its grounds weren't damaged, I've decided to let those people stay on the grounds, until they can go home again. You've turned the temple into a refugee camp for several thousand refugees. Tomo asked, with Amagi nodding to her. Won't Inari be against it? Well, I did say that in order to appease the goddess, they would have to follow a certain set of rules, like cleaning the grounds, providing help when I needed and other simple things like that. Amagi noted. And if goddess is displeased, I'm sure I'll be able to convince her that it was for the better of everyone, though I doubt it'll even come to it. Inari is a kind goddess and isn't as temperamental as some other gods. You always speak about her as if you know her, Amagi. Tomo noticed, with Amagi simply giving a small smile to her. I imagine the council appreciates your initiative. I hope they will at least compensate you for going through all the trouble. I don't know. Did Minato reward you for helping him stop the fox when he didn't ask you for help? Amagi asked, with Tomo understanding what her friend meant. I see. But at least the people will know whom to thank when their own supposed representatives have turned their back against them, Tomo said, as she continued walking. I think I'll still stop by, at least to see how things really are. Be my guest, Tomo, you are always welcome there. Forgive me for asking, but are you in a hurry to meet someone? Amagi asked her, with Tomo glancing at her. I've noticed that you aren't heading for the exit. Is there someone you want to see before you leave? There is. Tomo nodded to her. I'm not sure if you've heard, but while I was recovering here, I've started to pay visits to Naruto, Minato's and Kushina's youngest son. Tomo said, with Amagi nodding to her. I know that it sounds kind of strange for to do such a thing, but that kid, when I look at him, I can't just shake of the feeling that he feels lonely and is scared, despite how he looks. You may just start calling me crazy now, Amagi. If acting sympathetic and humane towards those that for some reason are left alone when they are not well, then being crazy isn't so bad in my mind, Tomo. Naturally, Amagi didn't judge Tomo. I've heard about the poor boy and his strange illness. Many claim that it is a curse sent upon the child by the Biju for imprisoning him in his brother and sister. Lord Hokage and his wife haven't confirmed or disclaimed those rumors, so nobody knows for certain what is going on with him. Doctors and Tsunade don't know either, and the kid just seems to fade away with each passing day. He is weaker every day and it appears that he might just pass away tomorrow or a day after tomorrow, if what I heard is true. Tomo said with sadness in her voice, as they were nearing the child's room, before Tomo turned to Amagi. Amagi, what do you know about the Shinigami? The gods of the dead and reapers of souls. They are creatures that reside in the realm of the dead, Yomi, and serve goddess of death and creation, Izanami. They are charged with seeing the souls of the dead being sent to either hell or heaven, as well as collecting them from the mortal realms. Most of the time they operate outside of the reach of normal people, unseen by them. Amagi told Tomo. But I know of a few cases where they were purposefully summoned, but every summoning of the Shinigami is a certain death sentence, because the summoner is killed by Shinigami afterwards. Tomo concluded. But, Amagi, do the legends tell of any way to summon a Shinigami, but not die afterwards? Say, shift the price on someone else. Tomo, summoning a Shinigami is always one-way trip, no matter how try to trick it. Amagi said in a serious tone of voice. I have heard of one legend where a man had managed to survive such a thing, but it didn't happen because of Shinigami being merciful to him. The man in question had previously warded himself off of Shinigami, but I do not know how he had done it. What I do know is that later on he had buried his wife, as the Shinigami had taken her from him as a payment and because it felt slighted by being denied its prize. Tomo, why are you asking me all of this? Being denied of the prize, I'm asking you, because on the night of the attack, Minato had used Reaper Death Seal, a sealing jutsu that summons a Shinigami to create a seal of incredible power. Tomo stated, much to the shock of Amagi. I know how to perform it too and I know the effects, but that night, Minato didn't die, but I have a feeling that it is Naruto who is paying the price now. It very well may be so. Shinigami are dangerous creatures to deal with. Is this the child's room? Amagi asked, with Tomo nodding to her, before opening it. There, in a sterile clean room, strapped to the monitors, on a medical bed laid a small, unmoving child, with pale skin, closed eyes and just barely seen breathing. He didn't wail, cry or even move a muscle, and just simply laid there. A dark red patch of hair with streaks of white adorned his head, with eyes shut and it created the appearance of the child being asleep. Tomo knew that it wasn't the case and that the child was simply too weak at this point to even open his eyes, as she moved closer to him, taking a seat near him and very gently putting her right hand upon Naruto's little arm. He was colder than she remembered him to be, but every time she visited him, he felt colder than previously. Back when she first visited him, he still looked at her with his blue eyes, but yesterday he wasn't able to open them and couldn't move a muscle. Now he couldn't even react to her, but somehow Tomo knew that Naruto felt her presence. She looked at him with sympathy in her eyes, before shifting her gaze at Amagi, before freezing. Amagi stood just there, her mouth agape and tears coming to her eyes, hands shaking, as she walked closer to the child. By the gods, how something so cruel could had happened to a child? Amagi asked in a shock, with her purple eyes looking directly at Naruto, as if seeing something that none could see. Amagi, Tomo asked her, what? Is there something wrong? Something wrong. This child has been branded by Shinigami, Tomo. Amagi almost shouted, shocking Tomo. This isn't just wrong, it is monstrous. What do you mean? What does it mean, being branded by Shinigami? Tomo asked of her, with Amagi calming down a little, before quickly closing the door into the room. Afterwards, she stepped closer to Naruto, lightly putting her hand upon Naruto's stomach, before she began to chant. Tomo had heard her friend chant prayers and such before, but this one was different, and she could sense that something was going on that she couldn't perceive just yet. After a few seconds of chant, Tomo saw how Amagi's hand glowed with unnatural golden light as she touched the child. The moment she touched Naruto, a dark unnatural cloud appeared all around him, with a kanji on his stomach being revealed to both women. Tomo looked at the kanji and nearly shuddered when she saw the shifting lines of that ethereal thing. This is the brand of Shinigami, one of the most horrific curses one can find in all of existence. Amagi told Tomo, those that have been branded do not find their souls being sent to hell or heaven, but suffer a far worse fate. They become food for Shinigami, souls torn apart and devoured by the death gods. And Naruto's soul is nearly gone already to Yomi, to be served on the platter to the one who branded him. How did you know that it was there, and what was it all about chanting in that glowing hand? It wasn't a jutsu, but it was something different. Tomo noted. I am no shinobi, Tomo, but those that think that world is inhabited by just those creatures that they know of are wrong in their assessment, and that is all I shall say on the matter at the moment. Amagi told Tomo. This child, it pays for his father's actions. Is there any way to have this brand removed, or blocked from action? I know every seal created by the Uzumaki, there might just be. Tomo was hopeful that with this information, she would at least be able to help the child. I am sorry, Tomo, but once branded, there is no escape. The brand can't be destroyed, removed or passed on to someone else. Only someone of the highest planes of existence can remove something like this, and in this case, it would have to be the one who commands the Shinigami, Izanami. Amagi said with sadness in her voice, before looking at the child. I'm afraid that there is nothing that we can do, no matter what we try, and there isn't much time left for him. How long? Several hours, at most, I believe. Amagi said to Tomo. Then, the least we can do to him is keep him company, at least so he wouldn't be so scared. Tomo said with a resigned tone, with Amagi agreeing with her, sitting next to the child. If only the two know what was happening in the higher plane of existence. Different plane of existence. Yomi, land of the dead. Dark and inhospitable, where all that was living could not exist under any conditions, that was Yomi, the realm of the dead and where all souls eventually found their way. It truly lived up to its name, for the realm thrived in shadows, plains where deadliest and poisonous grass grew, with trees wrecked with death and where only creatures that are spawned here can survive. No living mortal should step into Yomi, lest they seek to remain here, only in form of its occupant, or a ghost in other words, and not every god or goddess braves these lands. But the one who was walking down the road leading to the dark castle situated right in the middle of this endless and desolate realm. It was a tall man of a godly physique, with long and luscious black mane of hair reaching to the middle of his back. His eyes were the color of gold, with a third eye closed on his forehead, with 3 lines crossing it. He had a beautiful face of a man in his late 20s without a speck of flaw upon his fair skin. His torso was exposed, revealing a body that any woman would drool over, with black pants and sandals covering his legs. He walked with a spear, or more specifically, a trident, in his right hand, made pitch black material and with golden central spear adorning it. He traversed the realm of Yomi long and hard, ever since he departed from the realm of mortals, but he was now near his destination and he was going to see his will be done. In front of the traditional-looking castle stood guard numerous ogre-like creatures, massive in size and easily dwarfing the man. Those were Oni, yokai, created from evil, malice and dark energies, and who resided here in Yomi, serving as punishers of the evildoers and those that deserved its fate here. They also were frequent terrorizers of the mortal realms when they could escape from here, and more often than not, when people spoke of about Oni being real, they really were. Armed with giant clubs, axes, swords and all that was fit for their size and stature, a literal army stood watch before the castle, with its commander now approaching the traveling person. He was a red Oni with a white mane, dressed in armor of the samurai and with a giant odachi for a weapon. He looked down at the traveler and bellowed down on him. What's this? A lost traveler. You are very far from home, pilgrim, and you should not have wandered here on your own. Oni spoke with laughter, while the man did not bat an eye. But it is good that you've arrived to us. I and my boys have been getting bored and mistress won't give us any drinks, so now we'll have you entertain us. If you provide us with enough fun, we might actually let you live. Other Oni laughed when the commander spoke, but then all of them went silent when the man spoke. I've come to see your mistress. Step aside, Oni. The traveler's tone indicated that he was serious. Huh, or what? You think you can just come here and demand a meeting with our mistress without any care in the world? You think you threaten us in our realm? Let's see how you taste. Oni commander already raised his sword and prepared to swing it. Only to find his head cut off before anyone could even bat an eye, and when the severed lump of flesh hit the ground, the field was sounded with cries and shouts of pain. 2,000 Oni guarded the entrance into the castle, and it took 2/10 of a second of the stranger to cut through these beastly monstrosities. One such creature could be dangerous to deal with even for dozens of shinobi deal with, and there were instances in history with Oni destroyed or literally ate entire clans of shinobi. But for this person, they were merely dust that tried to stop the tsunami. With his sheer will, he opened the great gates of the castle and stepped through them into the inner yard of the keep. It was there that he was greeted by the second line of defenders of this castle, an army of Shinigami, assembled and ready to destroy this invader. The stranger didn't stop and continued to move forward, despite the fact that not even most gods would want to face such a dangerous force head-on. The leading Shinigami stepped before the stranger and spoke in a grave-inducing voice. You trespass upon the domain of death, living one. There is nothing for you to gain here, only death which you brought upon yourself today. Shinigami stated to him, whatever you wished to gain, whatever you sought to accomplish, know that all of it shall end in your infinite suffering, for trespassing upon the lands of our mistress. I seek an audience with your mistress, Deathbringer. If you or anyone else wishes to stand in my way, then I shall not hold back. Stranger stated to them, my patience is running thin, as is the time of your existence. Step aside, or become naught but memory. That riled up the Shinigami, and they had already prepared to launch themselves at the intruder, when the invisible hand of their mistress stopped them. The mistress, she will see you, living one. At those words, the horde of Shinigami stepped aside and allowed the stranger his passage. The stranger continued his walk into the castle, doors opening before him, releasing a chilling wind, which didn't bother the man as he walked forward. It took him a minute to reach the great hall of the castle, where upon the throne sat the person he sought to converse with. Upon the throne, made what looked obsidian, sat an absolutely ebony white woman, dressed in black figure-fitting robes with short sleeves and cape. Her hair long and made into a bun and 6 offshoots. Sclera of her eyes was black, while iris bloody red, with them eyeing the intruder. Dark red veins ran across her whole form, seemingly pulsating with power. A small smile was upon her as she looked at the intruder with no hidden amount of interest. She was the first one to speak. Many eons have passed since you've last stepped into my realm. She spoke in a calm, welcoming tone. Forgive my minions, they seem to have forgotten their manners before their betters. Especially one that is my blood and descent. She said with a smile, feeling the rippling sense of fear coming from the inhabitants of Yomi at her statement. I came here caring not for their manners and etiquette. I have come here seeking your aid and your favor, Izanami. The stranger spoke to her, bowing his head. My favor? Now why would I ever deprive my grandson of my favor? She asked rhetorically, before she rose from her throne and walked to him. Now, raise your head, Shiva, and tell me, what does God of destruction and creation wishes of goddess of death and creation? I've come to you from Sakai, the realm where, Shiva instantly saw how Izanami's face twisted from anger at the mention of that world. Where Kagaya had went and where she, along with your brothers, have dared to upset the natural order of development. That realm still reels from the devastation they brought with their battle, and the consequences, I need not tell you of just what the consequences are, don't I? Izanami clearly saw how a flare of anger flashed in the golden eyes of her grandson. I've seen and felt how my world suffered and nearly was destroyed when my mother and brothers had battled. I was the one that saved it and humanity from being destroyed. do not remind me of it. And I have not forgotten the catastrophe that were Hagoromo's sons. Shiva clenched his trident a little harder. Indra's pride, Ashura's carelessness and Hagoromo's ignorance had plunged my world into a cycle of endless warfare and death, which sees mankind stagger and stop in their development. Even my people were destroyed in that mauling cycle, which saw my wife cry tears for 10 years, so do not remind me of the consequences, Izanami. I've come here to you to see that mess finally rectified. Shiva stated with conviction to her. Oh, so you are finally willing to do it. I must admit, Shiva, I am a little surprised and shocked that it took you so long to get to this point. Izanami admitted to him. Care to tell, what caused such a sudden shift in priorities? You were once a supporter of their natural development, so to speak, but now, have you realized that those mortals won't change themselves? Or have you seen the threads of fate weave into one outcome for them? All of the above, Shiva admitted to Izanami. As you are aware, I am capable of perceiving the possible outcomes of future, and because of that, I've come to you, Izanami. Threads weave into one distinct ending for Sakai, and that is the death of humanity. No matter the variables, the outcome is the same and it remains that way, for humanity, or rather, shinobi, will not change their ways, no matter how they try. Not even that man, Hashirama Senju, was able to change them or change the cycle. All he had done was enlarge the scale and drag my descendants into that chaos. I am sick and tired of watching it go on, and I've come to break this wheel. And how do you wish to break it, What do you need of me? Permission to destroy it. Go ahead and do it. World are born and destroyed throughout the cosmos all the time, and other gods will probably not even notice if that world gets destroyed. Izanami said without the care in the world. No, you are not here to see it destroyed. You are here for something far more interesting, aren't you? Some time ago, in Sakai, there was an incident, involving one of my brother's spawns, Kurama. You should have noticed the sudden torrent of souls coming in. Shiva spoke up. Yes, that has occurred, and along with that, one of my Shinigami had been summoned in that realm by a mortal, yet failed to deliver me the soul of the summoner. Izanami noted, before giving him a knowing smile. I'm aware that you were also observing that place, and that you've come here to seek to take what that Shinigami gained. I was not aware you were also paying attention to that. Shiva said. I didn't, but the guest who arrived before you did inform me about it all. Izanami told him. Isn't that right, my dear Parvati? Shiva widened his eyes when he heard it, and then he heard soft footsteps behind him, making him turn around. Before him stood the most beautiful woman for him in all of Cosmos, one that had become his eternal companion and love of his life. Mother to his children and female beginning to all of Uzumaki to his male beginning to Uzumaki, the embodiment of loyalty and love to one's family, along with warrior's spirit and mercilessness to all of evil. She stood just a little shorter than him, with purple-like sakura long hair, with a flower on the left side of her, purple eyes gazing into his. She wears a blue blouse with golden embroidery and short sleeves, complemented by the same colored shirt that reaches to the floor. She flashed him a loving smile, before grasping Shiva's cheek and speaking up to her husband. You've left with such haste and without saying a word, that I was worried you would destroy half of Yomi upon your arrival. I was fortunate that our son had lent me his peacock and I was able to arrive here faster, so as to hasten what you wished to accomplish. Parvati told Shiva, who stood motionless and surprised. You were aware of my goals, Parvati? Shiva asked of her, with her nodding to him. Your thoughts are well known to me, and it is no secret that you grieve for the death of Uzumaki people, just as I do. Parvati said, with a single tear coming out from her eye. Not a moment goes by that I do not return with my thoughts to them and what became of them. They were swallowed up by the corrupted world and grinded into ashes, because they were different from the rest of them and tried to break out of the cycle. Do not forget that I was there when my children fell and that it was I who claimed the heads of all those that dared to set foot upon our isle. Shiva and Izanami clearly saw how Parvati's eyes blazed with crimson red for a moment, before returning to their previous color. And also their souls from me and my hounds, but I do not mind that. Knowing what fate awaited those arrogant shinobi that had dared to set foot upon the Uzu was enough of a satisfaction for me to not demand recompense for being denied what was mine. Izanami chuckled darkly, as she moved slowly throughout the hall. Now, let us get down to business, as the mortals like to say. What is it that you what, really? The soul of the child that was marked, Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. It is being absorbed by your Shinigami. Shiva spoke up, with Izanami stopping, with her face displaying displeasure after hearing of it. I am prepared to grant you any recompense that would accommodate your wish. The matter isn't in just recompense, but rather in the fact that the part of soul of that child that was taken thus far, has already been consumed by that Shinigami. Izanami stated to them, shocking both Shiva and Parvati. What? For the first time since coming here, Shiva allowed himself to lose what little self-restraint he had, which resulted in the entire floor of Izanami's castle being now cracked and damaged, but it was instantly repaired at the will of Izanami. The Shinigami in question was so irked and angered by what he considered to be a personal offense and theft that he didn't wait for the soul to fully reform in Yomi. Instead, he satiated his hunger upon it when it got in here, piece by piece. Izanami informed them both. I only learned of it when I decided to check it myself. That upstart didn't even pretend to be sorry, relishing the flavor of that child's soul, and for that I ended his existence. I do not have any need in cruel sadists that care for their own pride than doing their duties properly. Unfortunately, it still means that the rest of the boy's soul is lost, and the last part that shall be arriving here soon will become food for my Shinigami. And even if I were to lift the brand off of him, he would still die mere days later, given the fact that his soul is so fractured and small. He would return here to be reformed and then later to be reborn. Such a shame, for this poor unfortunate soul, to die so soon twice in the row, and all because of the same people. Then, there is nothing to be done. That child, can't we save him in any way? Even if, Parvati was starting to sound like she was losing hope, until Shiva spoke up. No, there is still something that we can do, Parvati, and we will. Izanami, lift that brand off of him. Shiva demanded of her, intriguing her with his conviction. His human soul may be not long for the mortal realm, but that doesn't mean that there isn't time to save him. And how would you do it, my grandson? Izanami asked of him, with Parvati looking curiously at him. The same way that the Uzumaki people came to be in the first place, we will directly grant him our blessings. Shiva stated to Izanami, surprising her and Parvati. The same way you've made Kagaya and her first husband your children. We will adopt him. You would do this to that child, only to see your desires fulfilled and to see that world changed. Izanami saw that her grandson had glared at her, for implying that he was heartless. No, there is something deeper than that. Could it be that you feel guilty for not preserving your children and wish to atone for your sins through him? Would go as far as to disregard the decree of other gods about our neutrality in the lives of mortals? Would you really break the established balance, Shiva, when you were the one who swore to uphold it? I swore to uphold the cycle of life, the infinite process of change and evolution of life. Sakai suffers from stagnation and cyclic existence that serves only further the system of death, destruction and corruption. The people have lost their harmonious way of living with nature and can't even see the full of their world. Shiva said with mix of sadness and anger in his voice. Parvati moved to comfort him. The so-called balance you've spoken about, Izanami, is a perversion of change and an aberration. My brother had believed that humanity could harness chakra and use it come together, disregarding the fact that humanity wasn't ready to be entrusted with such power. His sons had shown the flaws of his ways when they've started the cycle of death. I've had enough of their mistakes destroying the world and humanity, and I have had enough of living with guilt of not saving my children. My last child now lies dying and I will not abandon him. Such conviction and strong words, just the things I would expect to hear from you, Shiva. Izanami said to him with a small smile. Very well, I shall lift the brand, and I'll even help you too with your idea, by adding a little bit of myself into your mix. That shocked them both. You will. But what do you stand to gain from it, Lady Izanami? Parvati asked of her. A new grandson, from the start, and to give that poor soul a far better chance of surviving in that treacherous world. Not to mention someone I could spoil rotten like a grandmother. Izanami said at first amusingly, as she sat in her throne. But aside from that, I too would like to have my vengeance upon the destroyers of Uzumaki. They were of my bloodline, and unlike my former husband, I do not forget and forgive such things. And that child will be able to satiate my need for retribution, but even right now, I already stand to gain what I had wanted for eons, but couldn't reach. Izanami looked with a knowing eye at Shiva, who suddenly understood what she wanted. You would have me deliver you the souls of my brothers and their sons. Izanami, Shiva was about to argue with her, but she interrupted him. You wish to have that child saved and you've said that you would do anything for it, haven't you, Shiva? Then prove to me now that those were not just words, right now. I know that you've swore off from touching your brother's souls and children, but we both know that they are still responsible for the chaos that plagues Sakai, and they continue to remain unpunished. At least, some of them still do so. Izanami said to them. Hamura's line has extinguished itself, and his soul has passed through my realm already. So that leaves you, Shiva, with only 3 other souls to collect for me. So what shall be your decision, my grandson? Shiva looked right in the eye of Izanami, reading a direct challenge to his convictions and determination, and there was a struggle between his desires and memory of the past. He had loved and respected his brothers, and when they were still young, he could never see himself do harm to them, but the times had changed and he was forced to change with them. And then came Indra and Ashura. They had destroyed what little chance humanity had for change and harmony by plunging it into the chaos of war. Back then, only his love for Hagoromo had stopped him from decimating them both, and then later he had to serve not just his own realm, but many others. Now he was asked to prove that his decision was finally see the wrongs made right was strong in his mind. After millennia of indecisiveness and cowardice, Shiva was ready to what was needed to be done. Detaching himself from Parvati, he moved to the center of the room and connected through the cosmos with Sakai and its living beings. Even from Yomi, creator and destroyer god could sense and see the chakras of Hagoromo and his sons, as well as connect them directly. His search for them was short, as he found the reincarnations of Indra and Ashura, as well as the soul of his brother, seemingly scattered throughout all of chakra that he had given to the mortals. Such a seemingly impossible task for most beings, such as locating souls that were literally entwined with chakra, was a small feat for Shiva, just as it was locking on to them and bringing them to Yomi directly. With his will in mind, Shiva detached the souls from the young children, not hurting them or their own souls in any way, but freeing them from the fate of the 1,000 predecessors that came before. Now they were truly allowed to be what they wanted to be, without Indra and Ashura interfering in their lives and fates through their presence in them. As for his own brother, it took more effort from Shiva, but he did what needed to be done, as Sakai had felt a very tiny rippling effect upon itself throughout chakra, one that will go unnoticed for most, save for that are strongly attuned with natural energy of Sakai. With those tasks being completed, Shiva opened his eyes and with a light movement hit his trident's bottom upon the floor, summoning the 3 into this realm. 2 circles of light formed in front of him, Parvati and Izanami, and from them emerged 3 figures, all looking as if they were in the prime. Indra and Ashura, looking as young as they were when they had begun to their feud, with Hagoromo emerging in the middle of the 2, looking like he was far older than when he had his sons. They looked confused, before Hagoromo noticed with his Rinnegan eyes his youngest brother, Shiva, speaking to him. Shiva, where have you summoned us? For what purpose have you ripped us out of chakra? Hagoromo demanded to know, before he took the look around himself. This place, it reeks of death and, is this what I think it is? Father, brother, how are you all here, alive and so young? Ashura asked of them, before getting into the fighting stance. Doesn't matter how you've cheated death, Indra. I'll make sure to end you once and for all. Then stop barking and come at me, you little fool. Indra goaded him, readying himself for a fight, until both he and Ashura were stopped by Shiva, who materialized his divine chains from his back and used to them to subdue his unruly nephews. What the hell are these? Uzumaki chains. That is quite enough, both of you. You've spent literal millennia in your unending battle, dragging countless souls into the abyss with you, shaping the very future of the world into an unending conflict and denying humanity a chance to grow past its infantile stages. Shiva stated to them both, holding them firmly in place. Now it is time you face the punishment for your actions, nephews. Shiva, what are you talking about? Why have you summoned us all here? Hagoromo asked of him. He is doing what needed to be done eons ago, Hagoromo. Izanami finally made herself known to the three, shocking Hagoromo instantly. You and your sons are guilty of quite horrendous crimes, and you've escaped your punishment for far too long. No one has the right to deny me what is mine upon the death of all creatures, yet you've dared to challenge me as you did. Your two idiot brats chose the path of reincarnation through their bloodlines, while you, Hagoromo, have decided to escape my grasp through the chakra you've gifted to humanity. Clever of all of you, but you've only staved off my wrath until I've gotten a hold of you. Lady Izanami, please, you have to understand that, Hagoromo had tried to plead to her, but wasn't allowed to speak. That you still hold hope that your sons, or their reincarnations, will finally mature enough to stop their feud. That they will finally bring the world to peace and prosperity it should have achieved eons ago. That your ninshu will finally prosper as it should have been originally, a path to harmony and communication. Izanami asked in a mocking manner. For the one who claimed the title of sage, your ignorance knows no bounds, Hagoromo. You've failed to notice the divide between your sons, created through the disparity in their abilities and talents, and you've not seen how your eldest was consumed by pride and arrogance, festered by your demand in training him and by that worm, spawned by my daughter. And even when you did see it, what did you do? How did Sage of the Six Paths choose to face the imminent threat to his ways in peace? You chose to step aside and let your sons battle it out, giving your youngest the power to match his elder brother. What an ingenious way to destroy all you've worked for. I meant only for Ashura to stop Indra, not destroy what was built by me and my followers. Hagoromo defended himself. I meant for them to stop, to realize that power and brutality was not the way to achieve peace. They needed to understand it themselves. There were far less destructive and more profound ways to bring your wisdom upon them, but you chose to stand aside like a coward. Parvati said to Hagoromo, before taking a look at Ashura and Indra. Your indecisiveness had cost the world hundreds of thousands of lives and put into a loop that it needs to escape from. And without us, there is nothing that can break that cycle, Parvati. Without us there is nothing that can now stand in the way of Kagaya returning, and even now, there are forces on the move, determined to see her reborn. Without Indra and Ashura, without their reincarnations, there is nothing to stop her from coming back. Hagoromo shouted at them. That is where you are wrong, brother. Shiva told him. Mother's seal may be weakened now, allowing her the window of escape, and it is true that the reincarnations of your sons can have the potential to stop her. However, that doesn't mean that they hold the chance of changing the world in the way it needs to change. I can perceive that few timelines contain the world that exists after them, fewer even where the world is in some state of peace, but I see far too many visions where this shinobi world is rocked with strife and war unseen before. Yet the possibility for the better world remains, Shiva. Isn't this enough of a reason to let us go? I'm certain that with hope and proper guidance, they will do what you wish, Shiva. Hagoromo tried to convince his brother, but found him unconvinced. I've held my hand for eons, Hagoromo, relying on this hope and belief in the better future, and despite how countless times I saw your sons' reincarnations wreak havoc upon the world in their wars, I still stayed my hand. Shiva admitted to him. But, after I saw the only vestige of harmony, peace, prosperity and alternative of Sakai, my people and children, the Uzumaki, being destroyed by the system that they had created, I realized that they will not change the world, and even if they do, it will be at the expense of millions, possibly billions of lives being grinded to dust in their war grinder. I am sick and tired of waiting, so I'll do what they should have done. And as for our mother, Hagoromo, you can rest easy knowing that she and her lackeys will be greeted by someone very capable of stopping them. My son will be there, and he will do what needs to be done, whatever it may to require. Now, Izanami, do what you must. With pleasure, Izanami said, as her eyes glowed for a second. Shiva released his nephews, letting them fall to the floor, and the moment they did, a black chains opened up underneath them, with tendrils shooting out of there and grabbing the three by their limbs. Indra and Ashura struggled and tried to release themselves, but were unable to escape the manifestation of Izanami's power where she was at her strongest. Not Kagaya or even Izanagi would be able to break free from the hold of those things. Hagoromo didn't struggle, simply bowing his head in shame and accepting his fate, daring not to face his brother and grandmother. Shiva turned his head to Izanami and simply nodded to her, letting her know that he has had enough of this charade. Without any words, the three were pulled down into the abyss, before the hole was closed up, leaving no trace of them in Yomi and other world. Izanami let out a sigh, before stepping closer to her grandson and his wife. With a gesture of her hand, she opened up a portal out of Yomi. Now, shall we be off? Time is running short, and if we do not hurry, we may miss our chance to gain a new member of our family. Izanami said, as they stepped through the portal. Sakai, Konoha's hospital. Time froze for all of world, as three celestial beings appeared in the hospital, stepping out of the portal and into the realm of mortals. Frozen in place and unable to perceive the presence of gods, humans around them were unable to witness Parvati, Izanami and Shiva appearing right front of Naruto, where he was visited by Tomo and Amagi, with the former frozen and unable to perceive them, but the latter. How curious, Izanami said in an amused tone, as she saw Amagi rise up from her seat, shock present on her face and trembling out of sheer fear and being in the presence of three gods at the same time. Calm yourself, servant of Inari. We are not here to harm this little one or you. L Lady Izanami, L Lord Shiva, Lady Parvati, what is it that why you seek in S Sakai? Amagi barely had managed to say. We seek to do as needed for this child, and to give this world a better future. It is not our intent to harm anyone here. Parvati said softly, before turning her head to Naruto. It is our decision and desire to give this child what it deserves and gain what we lost family. Family? Amagi asked again, but she didn't receive any answer, as the three deities moved to Naruto and focused their attention upon him. Such a beautiful child, he looks just like our Skanda, when he was the very same age. Parvati couldn't keep a smile off, before reaching with her hand to the child's cheek, caressing it. Same hair and shape of face, though these white hair do make him distinct. Like light of sun creeping in from the red leaves. Fault of my Shinigami, but I think they look rather unique with him. Make him stand out and memorable, which is something I would want in my grandson. Izanami noted with a smile. I suspect that he will be a magnet for women all around him, and if he'll grow up to be even half as dashing and daring as your Skanda, then there is little doubt that women will flock to him without any regards. And he'll probably be all too happy about it. Izanami sent a sly smirk towards Parvati, reminding her about her younger son's attitude, making Parvati blush a little at the mention. He simply inherited a bit more from one of my more extreme sides. Parvati stated with some reservation, before she turned towards her husband, who looked intently towards the child. Shiva. Looking at this child, Shiva was able to see into the possible outcomes of all that was to come from this event. He could clearly predict and see how this child will grow up, what will be his fate in this world, and what he saw had made Shiva think about his decision carefully. To place such powers upon a child, to grant him even a small part of them to him, it would be as risky as dangerous and unpredictable. In many futures he saw this child lynched and killed by the very people of this village, just because he didn't fit it. In others he saw the father of this child, so-called Yellow Flash, ordering his execution, seeing him as a threat to the false prophecy. In others, the resentment and anger led this child to the dark path of destroying the shinobi world, but also creating something far worse than before. Shiva knew that he couldn't allow those kinds of future to come to fruition. But where he saw darkness, he also saw just as much light, and in other futures, Shiva perceived that Naruto will be able to do what he wished of him. He saw him as a warrior, scholar, sage and ruler, separately and combined, changing the world through hope, actions and sheer will. He perceived many futures where Sakai thrived and harmony was achieved, and where Naruto rose to join him and other deities, and there just as many where he remained loyal to only his world. Shiva felt hope and harmony in those futures, where Naruto was able to forge his own path and come to the future where the world was saved. But along with the good and the bad ones, Shiva perceived just many futures, where they intertwined and mixed in together, creating future harmonies and peace that were won or lost through bloodshed and suffering of many, including Naruto. And these gray areas, where his future son would suffer and struggle, were also the most likely to happen. And if Shiva knew something about human nature, then it was how toil and suffering can lead others down the path of destruction and pain, becoming less human and more what mortals perceived as godlike. No, he needed for Naruto to retain his humanity and human nature, morals and ideals, but he couldn't enforce them upon him. The child will find himself alone, without anyone to turn to in the future, and then there will have to be those that will need to support him. People that was teach him the value of humanity, those that may open him a path towards life and peace, and Shiva could clearly see that Namikaze and Kushina weren't the people for it. Their futures were intertwined with that of the others, where they were led and manipulated by others and made believe in following a supposedly already set route, which greatly limited their possible outcomes for the future. No, Naruto will need someone who will teach him the value to free choice and living by your own code. He will need a mentor and a parent in one face, perhaps even several at once. Shiva turned his gaze away from Naruto, and then suddenly looked at the woman that was nearest to Naruto, observing her with his eyes. Izanami and Parvati could clearly see that something was going on with Shiva, and they suspected that it was connected to his powers of ultimate perception. After Shiva was done looking at the woman, he looked at still shocked Amagi, before speaking to her in a calming tone. Amagi no Tenko. Shiva's voice immediately made Amagi calm down and stop shaking. May I ask you a favor, servant of Inari? Of course, Lord Shiva. Amagi bowed before him out of respect, before raising her head. I shall do whatever you may require of me, as long as that doesn't interfere with my duties to Inari. I wouldn't ask you of that, Shiva assured her, before turning to the child. This child, he will be blessed by us three, but that will not secure him a safe and happy life. There shall be great toil and suffering awaiting him the future, emotional and physical, and much of it will come from the people of this village. He will be seen as something to be resented and feared, treated as someone who deserves not his station in life and status, looked down upon by those that are supposed to be his closest people. He shall perceive things that people disregard as lies and myth, a world in its true colors that men do not see anymore. They will see him as a fool, when in truth he shall be enlightened beyond their abilities. Such things will break any man and even God at their core, so I ask you, Amagi no Tenko, that you and your friend Tomo Uchiha, that you protect him when the time comes and you see him in peril of slipping out of his humanity. Become what we will not be able to be for him, and what his birth parents won't be for him. This is what I ask of you, Amagi no Tenko. Will you do this for us and for this child? I will, Lord Shiva. Amagi bowed to him, with Shiva smiling to her. You have my thanks. For you friend here, tell her that the connection she has with this child isn't her a way for her to dull the pain of her loss. It is what makes her human and that she should let herself be human. Shiva told Amagi. And tell her, that she had no hand in death of her child. A hand of malice, jealousy and envy took the child's life, one that still lives. Tell her not to seek revenge or vengeance, but to give this child what it will need, for with him lies her peace. Amagi nodded to them, as Shiva turned back to Naruto. All three deities exchanged looks with each other, before nodding, reaching consensus among themselves, before they each placed a hand upon Naruto's body. Shiva's hand landed upon Naruto's head, with Parvati placing her hand on Naruto's stomach, while Izanami placed her hand upon Naruto's heart, reaching with her powers for the brand and removing from the boy. Once it was done, Amagi felt how all three deities had gifted Naruto with part of their godhood, sensing through the natural chakra how Naruto was being healed and changed at the same time. His soul, fractured and weak, was remade by Izanami personally, with Shiva and Parvati granting their essences for the child. Goddess of creation and death added something from herself for the child, a small additional gift to her already generous present. She warded him from ever being claimed by Shinigami or creatures similar to those. While the boy would still remain mortal, he was safe if a being serving to the balance through deliverance of death will take notice of him and tries taking his life. Additional to his soul in this ward, Izanami gifted Naruto by changing his body, to make him stronger in the future and to fully utilize the powers that were passed down to him as an Uzumaki. He held now potential to become the new progenitor of Uzumaki people, stronger than ever, with all the gifts of their bloodline from Izanami. Parvati too was generous towards her adopted son, and gifted him with presents from all three aspects of her being. From her side as goddess of fertility, love and beauty, she blessed her son with beauty both outer and inner, which will be seen by others that wish to pursue his affections, along with ensuring that Naruto will not be without a spouse or spouses in the future. Parvati held no resentment towards polygamy, and if her child wished, then he was free to love more than one person. As Durga, goddess of war and protector against evil, Goddess gifted Naruto with instinctual understanding of arms and arts of battle, for she sensed that he shall need this in the years to come. With this gift, he shall be able to master any and all weapons that come into his possession, with enough determination, will and desire. And finally, as Kali, goddess of destruction and destroyer of evil, Goddess granted Naruto the strength in chakra and ability to use an even more powerful and dangerous energy key. To access it, Naruto will need to be open to all of world around him, but Parvati felt that he shall be able to access it, and when he does, even gods will be forced to reckon with him. Shiva's gift was the final one that was bestowed upon Naruto, and it was something that he himself had spent countless years developing sight and understanding of the world around him. With this, Naruto shall be able to perceive the world just like Shiva does and will also be able to connect with it on the level that has long been lost to humanity. He will perceive the world in such way that not even those that hide will be able to do so, such as yokai and spirits, and Naruto will be able to see and commune with them. And with understanding of things, he shall be able to see past their appearances and perceive their true natures, just as Shiva learned to do. With this, Naruto will be able to understand this world at a far deeper and greater level than other mortals and sages, and with this, Shiva hoped that Naruto will be able to perceive the world in a way that humans have not seen in ages, and will recognize what had happened to it. With these gifts, and their essences mixing with Naruto's soul, they were now done, and Shiva allowed himself to let out a small smile, before he spoke. Be well, my son. We will meet again when the time comes. Shiva told Naruto, letting him hear it. Before him, Parvati and Izanami departed from the realm. The moment they had done so, time resumed their own course and all once more began to move, not noticing a thing that had transpired just now. Only Amagi remained aware of what had happened and remembered the task that Shiva had given to her. Though she was loyal to Inari, she couldn't refuse the request of one like Shiva, and Amagi didn't have it in her to say no to him. She shall do whatever it took to protect the child and give him whatever he shall need. Gods may be unable to interfere so directly with the affairs of the mortals because of their task to maintain the balance of creation and let mortals develop on their own, but to see Shiva himself do so, there were going to be great changes in the world from this moment on. Tomo blinked, shaking off a strange feeling that something had just happened and she wasn't able to perceive it. She quickly forgotten about it, when she suddenly felt movement underneath her hand that was holding Naruto's small arm. She didn't notice at first, but then she saw something that shocked her to no end before her. On the bed laid Naruto, his eyes open and moving, looking every bit as any child should. The only thing that had thrown her off a little was the fact that his eyes were new, completely different. From the sky blue they were now the color of golden light. Shock was written all over her face, as she wasn't able to fully comprehend how this could have happened. Just 1 second ago, this child was at death's doorsteps and now. Tomo's shock was instantly gone when she heard Naruto first start to whine, and then when he started to cry out loud. Without a moment's notice and without even understanding it herself, Tomo disconnected Naruto from the monitors around him and gently laid him in her own arms, rocking him and calming him down. There, little one, no need to cry. Nobody will hurt you or scare you, else I'll make them very sorry about doing it. Tomo saw how Naruto was calming down in her arms, letting out a calm sigh, before looking at her smiling friend. Amagi, did you? I've done nothing with the child, Tomo, of that I can assure you. Amagi quickly told her. Then how is this even possible? Just a moment ago he was. Tomo couldn't wrap her head around it, until Amagi put her hand on her friend's shoulder and spoke calmly. I will explain everything to you once we are away from the prying eyes. Right now, I believe it would best if we've informed Hokage of the fact that he has left his youngest in the hospital, when he is in perfectly good health. Amagi stated to her friend, with Tomo nodding to her. You just sit here and I'll make sure that the message is delivered. And with that, Amagi left the room, leaving Tomo with Naruto in the room. It didn't take the priestess all that long to have the message about his son delivered to Hokage and his wife, for Amagi returned already in tow with Kushina, Minato and Tsunade, all three of whom were left stunned and speechless at what they saw. Before them stood Tomo, gently rocking completely healthy and healed up Naruto, a small smile dancing on her lips as she hummed a soft tune for him. This was definitely not what they wished to see, and Kushina was the first one to speak up, as her temper flared up akin to volcano.